Welcome to another video tutorial for Learning Music Theory with Logic, Max, and Finale, published by Routledge and written by Jeffrey Kidda. In this video tutorial, we'll discuss seventh chords. We'll discuss how we can create them with Logic's chord trigger and with Finale's chord tool. We'll talk about inverting seventh chords in Logic and Finale. We'll discuss the diatonic collection of seventh chords in the major and minor keys and their inversions. We'll take a look at the seventh chord generator, a Max MSP patcher to create seventh chords. We'll see how chord patterns can be created in Logic and Finale. And we'll look at the extended chords that are available in Logic and Finale. We'll also see how the seventh chord generator can be modified to create a seventh chord quiz, and we'll look at how seventh chords can be used in practical terms in creating music. There are 5 standard seventh chords: the major seventh, dominant seventh, minor seventh, half diminished seventh, and diminished seventh chords. These are all built on triads with an added note a third above the triad. As with the triads, seventh chords are identified by the root, quality, and position. The chords we have here are all based on C. They all have a C root, so we call them the C major seventh, the C dominant seventh, the C minor seventh, C half diminished seventh, and the C diminished seventh. All of the seventh chords have different interval content. The major seventh and the dominant seventh both start with a major triad, and for the major seventh we add a major seventh to it, and for the dominant seventh we add a minor seventh above the root. The minor seventh chord starts with a minor triad and has a minor seventh above the root. The half diminished seventh and the diminished seventh chords both start with a diminished triad. The half diminished seventh chord adds a minor seventh above the diminished triad, and the diminished seventh chord adds a diminished seventh above the diminished triad. Additionally, we can indicate the types of seventh chords we have with Roman numeral notation as well. The major seventh chord is indicated by an MAJ and a 7. The dominant seventh chord is indicated by just the 7. The minor seventh chord is indicated by a lowercase Roman numeral with a 7. The half diminished chord is indicated by a circle with a slash through it and then the 7. And then the diminished seventh chord is indicated by a circle which looks like a degree sign and a 7. With Logic's chord trigger, we can create the standard seventh chords, and we can also create extended chords and non-standard seventh chords. If we go to the chord trigger and from the drop-down menu we go from default to single to extended chords, we have this list which shows us all of the seventh chords and the other chords as well. The half diminished seventh chord and the minor 7 flat 5 are actually the same chord. You'll see both of them represented on the list, but they are the same chord with 2 different names. The list also includes some non-standard seventh chords, such as the augmented dominant seventh chord, the augmented major seventh chord, and the minor major seventh chord. This is the notation for the extended chords in Logic's chord trigger. And as you can see, some of the chords have 4 notes and some of them have more than 4 notes. The ones with the asterisks are the standard seventh chords, and as we can see, the half diminished seventh and the minor 7 flat 5 have the same pitches. We can also create the standard seventh chords with Finale's chord tool by using the chord tool and typing in the score, the root, and a chord suffix, which includes the quality and the figure. First, we type in the chords, then we save the file as a standard MIDI file, then we open that standard MIDI file in Finale, and we have the notation for the chords. The figures for seventh chords include, as we have seen, the root position figure, which is a 7, and that stands for 7, 5, 3 above the root. The first inversion for a seventh chord is 6, 5, and that stands for 6, 5, 3. The figure for the second inversion of a seventh chord is 4, 3, and that stands for 6, 4, 3. And then finally, the figure for a third inversion seventh chord is a 2, or sometimes a 4-2, and that stands for 6-4-2. You can memorize the figures for seventh chords if you think about numbers counting from 7 down to 2. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. We can invert seventh chords with Logic's MIDI transform tool, starting with a seventh chord, selecting the lowest note, and then with the transposition function of the MIDI transform tool, adding 12 semitones. We can invert seventh chords with Finale's canonic utilities tool by using the chord inversion up function for the chord. We're using the canonic utilities to create inversions of seventh chords. The diatonic collection of seventh chords in the major includes 3 minor seventh chords, 2 major seventh chords, 1 dominant seventh chord, and 1 half diminished seventh chord. Chord trigger is set to multi-parallel sevenths. Additionally, considering the inversions, we have a total of 28 diatonic seventh chords in every key. Here we have the C major collection with the root position and the 3 inversions. The diatonic collection of seventh chords in minor keys includes more possibilities when we consider all the variants that we can create using the raised and lowered 6th and 7th scale degrees. On this slide, the enclosed seventh chords are the less common chords. The tonic chord is typically a minor seventh chord. The supertonic chord is a half diminished seventh chord. The median chord is a major seventh chord. The subdominant chord is a minor seventh chord. The dominant chord is a dominant seventh chord. The submedian chord is a major seventh chord. And the leading tone chord is a diminished seventh chord. Considering the inversions, again, we have 28 possible diatonic seventh chords in the collection for the minor keys. And here we have the A minor collection with the root position and the 3 inversions. The seventh chord generator plays seventh chords and also shows the notation for the seventh chords. When we select the quality and the position and the voicing and then play a note on the on-screen keyboard, we will hear and see the notation for that chord. Chords are very often heard both vertically and horizontally, and in combinations of those two. When we listen to Chopin's Etude Opus 20 No. 1 in C major, it's kind of a dazzling opening with very fast arpeggios. But when you analyze the music, you will see and hear that it is essentially just a C major triad, which has been arpeggiated and spread out and inverted over several octaves. We can recreate this texture, this pattern, with Logic's arpeggiator. We can also use tools in Finale to create different patterns. For instance, we can take a triadic arpeggio and transform it into a 4-measure pattern. Subdivide the notes, repeat and transpose the measures, transpose the second note of each repeated pair of notes individually to create a broken triad pattern, and then retrograde measures 1 and 2 in measures 3 and 4. Finale's rhythmic subdivisions tool will allow us to take the quarter notes and turn them into pairs of eighth notes. Finale's transposition tool will allow us to move measures up and down by octaves. Finale's canonic utilities tool will allow us to retrograde measures. We can listen to extended harmonies with Logic's chord trigger. We have 4 examples here: the major 9th chord with the 7th as well, the minor 9th chord with the 7th as well, a sus4 triad with the 7th and 9th added, and a major triad with the 6, 9, and sharp 11 added as well. This last chord is also a C major chord plus a D major chord. Finale's chord tool allows us to explore many extended chords. If we first get to the chord definition window and then click on the select button of the chord suffix selection, we can see that there are over 90 different extended chords. In order for us to test our ability to hear the 7th chords, we could use a 7th chord quiz. Using Logic's chord trigger, we could create some backing tracks for a 12-bar shuffle blues progression. On another track in Logic, we might add a percussion part, and then on a third track, we might improvise a melody to go along with the progression. Notice in this version of the 12-bar blues, we are using dominant seventh chords throughout. And in this case, the dominant seventh chords are on the tonic and on the subdominant and on the dominant. So we can also use our programs to develop accompaniments for standards. When we're reading the sheet music for standards, we will often encounter symbols to indicate different types of seventh chords. And here we have some of the possibilities, some of the most usual possibilities for the major seventh, dominant seventh, minor seventh, half diminished seventh, and diminished seventh. For instance, we could take the song How High the Moon by Nancy Hamilton and Morgan Lewis and create an accompaniment in finale, using the chord tool to create the chords and using the drum groove to create a percussion background. We created the drum pattern with the drum groove tool, and we created the count off with the click and count off tool. Thanks for watching.